Good afternoon and welcome to episode 7 of Community. We are so delighted to have you. We have a very important show today. We kind of transitioned from what we promised you last week, and we'll get to that episode at a later date. But today it was important to us that we did a show around healing, particularly healing from trauma as related to these two pandemics that we're facing, the elder pandemic of racism and injustice, and the newest one known as COVID-19. Today, we'll be joined by three professionals, one psychiatrist, trauma psychiatrist, Dr. Alana Curry, as well as Bishop Johnny Tates and Pastor Mark Graffin-Reed. We're going to take a few minutes before we bring in our first guest, and we're just going to talk about what we've experienced during this time. We want to just have a conversation. We don't really talk to one another anymore, Portia, on the show about all that we're dealing with and, our thoughts on these things. But let's just spend a few minutes engaging. So yesterday we marched, the Houston branch NAACP members. Many of us came out. A group of us did journey together to, rally around the family of George Floyd and to stand in solidarity with families around the country. I know for me, my passion and thoughts are with all of the families, but in particularly Breonna Taylor, because so often the women who die from brutality, it's like you hear their names and then nothing. And when you look at civil rights, there's always women on the front line.
So many women.
So
many women.
Certainly. Yesterday, I think one of the most powerful speeches that I connected to, and I knew as soon as I saw her present that she was going to just rock me, as she always has. And that was Tamika Mallory.
Yes, this is Tamika.
First time I heard her speak was in 2015 when I traveled to DC for the 25th anniversary. I think it was 20th anniversary of the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March. And just to hear her galvanize all of those people there in Washington, and then to have her come yesterday, it was quite powerful because what she said was necessary. What about you? What was one of your favorite speeches?
I wouldn't say that I hone in on a favorite, but it was just nice to see the different perspectives. They did a good job, I think, of making sure that multiple individuals were heard or multiple viewpoints were heard. But I enjoyed when they gave Floyd's family the opportunity to speak. I think it might have been his brother and then one of his cousins that really one of them got it really fired up. And got everybody moving and motivated. And them just saying it can't just end with these marches, right? We can't let this happen, and then we go back to normal, right? And I think that that's something that we've seen so many times, time and time again. It never goes back to normal for us, but the attention to it kind of teeters off, right? And so I think that's one thing that I appreciated them saying, and I think that more people need to look at that. This is our everyday existence, right? This isn't something that fades. This is us 365, 100% of our lives. This is the things that we deal with, the traumas that we encounter. And it's something that it doesn't go away. So I appreciated that. And I think that needs to be spoken more frequently so that people understand this is not a temporary thing. This is not come and go. It's not okay.
It's not.
So I appreciate it. I appreciated that. And I like the fact that the organizers, Bun B, Trader Truth, took the time to include his family. Because I think it's important that you hear from individuals directly impacted. It's one thing for all of us who didn't know him. There's a lot of people here in Houston that knew him. And I think that was important for their voices to be heard, and specifically the family. So that was absolutely necessary. And I'm happy that they were able to do that.
Yeah. And then to hear from Dr. Lawson a civil rights icon, you know,
Right.
Houston civil rights icon, to hear him and for him to encourage the young people to continue to let their voices be heard.
Absolutely.
That was powerful. I mean, at 93 years old, he's still fighting for civil rights.
It's sad too, though, right? Because when you think he's 93, right? He made a point to say he was like Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King was born 6 months after him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it in that perspective, and like the fact that that all of this is still going on, like stuff that they were seeing, like literally it's images from when they were young, you know, in their late 20s or early 30s, that's still existing today. It's disheartening at the same time, right? It's powerful to hear that he's still advocating, right? But at the same time, it's disheartening to really truly have someone that's 93 years old tell you what we're seeing today in our lifetimes is stuff that he saw when he was our age, right? So that truly tells you just how long these injustices have been going on. It's not something that we're making up. It's true. It's real. And I think more people I think our allies or people outside of our race and our community need to understand it.
All right. So without further ado, thank you, Portia. I'm going to introduce our first guest. Portia, we'll get right back to you. Our first guest this evening is Bishop Johnny Tates. He is the senior pastor over at Empowerment Church of God in Christ. Let me say it correctly. And he oversees over 70 churches throughout throughout Texas. He is the chair of our Religious Affairs Committee for the Houston branch in AACP. And he's a very powerful voice. So without further delay, I'm going to bring in Bishop Tates. Good evening, Bishop.
Good evening. Good evening, Ms.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So let's start with this. Could you just, as an elder in our community, someone who's lived through the civil rights movement, and as a man of God, what are your thoughts, your immediate thoughts about this moment in time?
The immediate thoughts naturally would be very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
I can show you a number of instances in the Bible where this same kind of scenario has happened before. And it's sometimes will only take something worse in order to make it better. We as the Christian community pretty much adhere or aspire to embrace the Bible. And the Bible says that there's certain segments of society that we're always going to have with us. The one thing I continue to tell myself and those who converse with me is this is not the last world in which we're going to live. Mm. And too often people think this is all there is to it. And certainly our enemies, those who continue to oppress us, believe that when you're dead, you're done. But if they look at all of history, they see the recycling. They see everything comes back again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a sign that that this life will yield to another life. And finally, that I have to embrace that. And lastly, you know, if you have gone through an experience and nobody else went through it, they'd never understand why you feel the way you do. Mm-hmm. I met the Lord personally when they were talking about taking my right leg off. They were not responding. I'd been in a body cast for 13 weeks. The keloids, as you know, blacks heal inside and outside. Mm-hmm. Refused to let it have any flexibility, and subsequently, I did hear the doctors on the other side of the curtain talking about what they thought was the recommended prognosis for me going forward. I was told I'd never walk straight. I surely never run. And I went by my father's house, who was my pastor. Mm-hmm. And he prayed for me and said, God, but you promised. And the next thing I knew, I ran out of the house, drove to my house, and the phone was ringing. And back in those days, we didn't have a call waiting or a message box. And it just kept ringing. And when I picked it up, my father said, son, you forgot your crutches. So I have an experience that teaches me that there is a power greater than medicine,
Okay. Yeah.
greater than therapy. And so those things have shaped my future. And it's hard for us to tell, especially present young men, 20, 22, 23 years old, who have paid the price to educate themselves, tried to live by the tenets of the law, only to find out that that same law by which they try to ascribe or line up with takes advantage of them and gives exclusivity and immunity to prosecutors who falsify information and officers who unfairly, unjustly take a life. So it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you say to the congregation that's in the comments, right? What do you say to the congregation of strangers who would gather here this evening and hear from you, hear from Dr. Alana, hear from Pastor Mark? What do you say to them about moving forward as an advocate for those who are of faith, as an advocate of Christ, but also in their voices just as humans in this moment? What do you say to them? What to deal with their trauma? How do they navigate that?
That's a brilliant question, and it's so attentive to the details that we experience right now. It's kind of hard to tell people who, like I said, between 20 and 30, and maybe even older, who've lived with this. I listened to the previous guest talking about the relationship with Dr. King and the former pastor of Wheeler Avenue, who I know very well, and saying it's been going on that long. It's been going on a whole lot longer than that. Been going on 400 years. And so what I would say to them is it's difficult to give them the heaven view, because to them, that's the pie in the sky. What I would say to them is one of the best things to do when you're dealing with something like this is find the purpose in your own life that's greater than the pain that's going on in your life.
Oh, wow.
And what
Can
I
you
mean,
say that again?
find the purpose for your life that outruns the pain that's in your life. And what I mean by that is if some of these young men would unify and form a real estate agency, get their real estate license and trust one another and solidify their income and revenue and began to buy up property, began to do some things that's the purpose. The purpose is to become self-sustaining, to begin to hire us, to help us, to take care of us. And when we do those kinds of things, then our purpose becomes larger than our pain. And we can march, and truth is, no matter how long they march, this isn't the first one.
Right.
And we always get promises, but very little results. And so what we have to learn to do is depend upon ourselves. I grew up in a community where everybody in my neighborhood told me, Little Tates, you're going to be somebody, all up and down the street. So I had that neighborhood, that village raising. And they continue to instill in me a belief that I have to this day. I was born to be somebody. And therefore, when we come, the talk that we had and the talk that we give, I've got grandsons, and I still have to warn them. And the only way to avoid it is to get yourself insulated. There's some pretty wealthy African Americans in this country. They still get privileges very similar to people who are not filled with the same skin pigmentation. And so you got to learn ways, to me, to discuss things in an intelligent way, not superstitiously, but to get someone's attention. I'll give you a point. When I went to work at HISD, the first day or the second day, I saw a sign that said Colored Girls Restroom in the basement. And I took it down. So the next day they sent for me and said, you took a sign down. I said, what sign? You took a sign, and then what did it say? To see if they would admit it. Fast forward in the conversation, I said, the sign that you're talking about mentioned colored. And they said, yes. I said, I bought a box of crayons. In this box of 48 crayons is a color that's white. but that's different from your skin color. But you're more pink, but it's in the box. So what I don't understand is when you put the sign up, didn't you mean all women? Because there is no woman in the world who is not colored. That was a discussion that got his attention. And I said, if it's here in the 80s, you got to sign up like that. You're a proponent of it. And if you're really that mean, I don't want to work for you anyway. So you see, sacrifice is one of the things. We want it all, but we don't want to pay the price to have it.
Mm.
Dr. Lawson paid a price. Taught me a great deal when I met him as a young minister. James Dixon and I grew up, I'm older, but we started preaching, I think, the same day. So that's what we got to do. We got to change our approach. And when we have nothing to exchange, then the conversation is not meaningful. But when we can collect property, because God ain't making no more of that, and they printing money every day. Mm-hmm. And we keep thinking, well, we've got to learn to have something that they want, the Jewish people want. And those are the kinds of things. Now, once we can produce our own crops, we can afford anybody's tractor.
You preaching?
Well, it's just
no, but that's good. That's good.
When I try to tell people that, they want a quick fix, and that's not what healing is. Healing is surgery and medication, medicinal management, and therapy, and all kinds of things. You got to give up dancing if you're trying to get your leg well. Well, that's what I don't see us doing. We talk, we go to school, but we don't unify and strengthen unity. Our whole society teaches us not to love ourselves. It teaches us self-hate. And that's why we kill each other in the community, because the movies, they all show us destroying one another. Planned Parenthood. It's right there near Yates. It was deliberately put there. Margaret Sanger is the next Nazi. That was it. So if we are honest, we have already aborted the cure to cancer. We keep wanting somebody to do it, but we did it. God gave them to us, but we aborted. We could have had a population now in the 20%, but we've aborted the difference between the 15.6 that we are now and that 25%. So we've got to stop self-destructing ourselves. We've got to realize that it's not good to vandalize other people's property. Maybe they got it unfairly, but you can't take it unfairly.
So to that point, mm-hmm. So there's a sentiment that I understand. There's a sentiment that to that point about destroying other people's property, that you got to do what you can to get their attention. Because when we march peacefully, when we ask demands, when we send petitions, no one says anything. Now we have all these corporations. Everybody has a public statement about the injustice, and we stand for Black lives. And it seems to be in response to the property destruction, not to the murders.
Right.
They're responding to the property damage.
Symptoms and disease, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Looting is a symptom, because murdering is a symptom, but the disease is racism. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's worse than the virus. And that's what we all know. Here's my response to that. Mm-hmm. Once again, we march together. But when we get through marching, we all go back to our own stations, our own place. We don't do any planning. I can remember in the school district, after a certain board meeting, the chief of police and the captain of police, who were African Americans, and two of the African American board members came to my office. And while we were talking, 5 of us, one of the board members stopped by to tell me he thought the presentation was unique and really loved it. And he saw 5 African American men, and you could just see his countenance change. He left. The next day, the superintendent came and asked me, Johnny, what, Dr. So-and-so came down and you were in with so-and-so? I told him, yes, they were all in here. He said, well, What were you doing? What were you thinking? I said, well, I was thinking the other day when I came to see you with a report, there were 23 white people in your office. And I had to tell myself that you guys weren't planning anything. But the minute one of you come and see 5 of us, you think we're planning. That's why this rule of lawful assembly, most of us don't know there was a time that we were prohibited to assemble because that's the kind of thing we've got to deal with. We've got to use the law to overthrow the utilizations or those who have the law. I could give you cases. Guy drove up in my yard New Year's night, spinning around in my yard, got bogged down, and I raised Doberman. So I just put them out so he couldn't get out. When the police came, and this was probably 82. He drove up and he had an African American female, and I'm going to say it the way I say it, an American of African descent.
Okay.
Because they all say they're Americans and we're African. See, you got to play. Yeah, you see the play on words. You and I talked about it today. But when he got out of the car, as she opened her door, he said, "You stay in the car. I got this." So he walked up and he said, "I'm going to call a wrecker and it's going to pull this guy's van out of your yard." And I said, "No, officer, that's not going to happen because he is over the assembly line. He's over that. He's in my yard. So I'm going to train him to chain his truck to that key. And in 366 days, I own his property." And he looked at me. He said, "Young man, I am the law." And I said, I wasn't a bishop then, so I used some colorful language. And I told him, "No, you're anything but the law. You're here to enforce it. But if you don't know it, you can't enforce it." I just quoted what the law says. 366 days from tonight, I own that man. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing you can do about it. And sure enough, he turned to the guy and he said, "You got a problem." And we just got to practice for something that isn't happening now. Something happens, and that's nothing but a reminder. And I want to tell, if I were talking to people today, I'd tell them sometimes God takes something bad so you can see better. I didn't say you can see better time, but you can see better that situation. And when nothing happens, we don't prepare until something happens.
Right.
That's why I'm saying if we can unify and pool our resources, we got to get away. We trust them and their ice is no colder. But we won't trust each other. We won't work together. We keep thinking if I build you a better business, that somehow you'll cheat me out of it. It's happening to us all the time. All the time. We pay light bills, but we never try to borrow any money from the light company. But if we go to church and we pay our tithe to the church, as soon as something happens, we want part of our money back. And it should be some, because there are poor that we'll always have. But I'm just giving you scenarios. If we will pool our resources, pool our ideas, because half of the inventions in this country are patented by folk we worked for when we came up with it. So if we would pool our resources and come up with companies that will last and then work to put people in political office rather than folk who don't look like us, who don't do anything for us. And I don't care what the political affiliation, that nobody's going to do as much for us as we're going to do for ourselves. Yeah. That's what I would say. And if you get to know Christ, there are some benefits. I have some stories to tell of how I know that things were changed for me, not of my own doing.
Last question.
Okay.
Before we end and give you. So I'm looking at the comments. So if y'all see me looking down, I'm either looking at the comments or I'm looking at the questions that are coming in on my phone.
Okay. That's good.
And so I'm listening. I'm very attentive with my ears. Mm-hmm. When you wear glasses a lot, you learn to be a really good listener.
Hello.
So you'll know what's happening when you don't have your glasses. Right. But there's questions about what happened before compared to now. So before it was peaceful until they killed Dr. King. And, I call them rebellions around the country. I won't label those riots. Riots is what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Greenwood, that's a riot. Or what
That's
happened in Memphis, back when Ida B. Wells was alive.
right.
Those were riots where you murdering people. But what I see is rebellion, no different from the Boston Tea Party. And this is my opinion, not NAACP. And it comes from watching and hearing from other people and just being familiar with history. So I want to line that up so no one gets confused about what I'm saying.
Sure.
But I'm going to go to the word. So many people have been referring to Jesus flipping the tables in the temple, right? Him doing that is an example. This is what some have said is an example of basically being fed up with the disrespect, the disregard.
Sure.
And then people relate that and they tie it also into Dr. King's word about, riot being unheard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you, I guess, empathize or share that same understanding? And I know that's just one quote from a very deep interview he had on 60 Minutes. But do you empathize with those who don't know how to compartmentalize or manage that anger, that frustration, and who are dealing with multiple layers of trauma? Do you understand where that comes from, and what do you say to them so that they can channel that? And I know that's a deep and twisted thing.
No.
But we got like 3 minutes.
Okay. First of all, I do understand. I haven't always been this old. Okay.
Right.
So people use what is available, right? If a man has a stick, he's going to use that.
Right.
The money changing turnover, listen at the turning over the money table. In other words, bus boycott. When we look and see the people who support Fox News programs, and we make up our mind that we're going to silently boycott that.
Wow.
We talk to other people and tell them, don't fraternize that business. We lower their income. Money is power in a country where money is number one. And the love of money is the root of every evil. Racism, slavery, American Revolution. And let me just quickly say this. To those of us who believe we're constantly losing our black boys, abortion took care of some of that. And we were responsible for that. That's number one. Secondly, watch God. He lets this same country have a civil war. And in the Civil War, 100,000 white men killed each other. And only 186 blacks died. So I hear them, but they got to know the history. They got to look at how God works. Most of us would say, God's just letting us die indiscriminately. See it? And that's what I'm saying. He took one war, 4 years, and 100,000 of them killed each other. Kinfolk, whatever. And that's how he sometimes balances this table. So what we need to do, we need to go back to what we used to do. We used to boycott. Now watch this society. As soon as someone gets a little strength in boycotting, they hire him or hire a relative of his and pay them a nice salary. And then they put a muzzle on the mouth of the speaker. That's the kind of thing we can avoid when we pool our resources and we're able to backbone and back pocket each other. So yes, Jesus did some radical things. Nobody would believe that spit was a better ophthalmological healing. But that's the kind of master that he is. We're not paying as much attention to him, just as you brought that up, but somebody who can take that very action and show it to him in a different scan, wrap it in a different package. That's how Jesus can stand out. That's why so many young people, because we're just basic with it. And I'm hoping that I've explained just several different ways. If we go back to boycotting programs, news stations that don't hire enough of us, you see, then we can have a lasting effect. But we got to be able to support each other, because when we give up our jobs, then we almost give up our own support. It's already tough enough living that way, but we got to be each other's backbone and each other's balance. And we got to pick somebody just like Dr. King picked Rosa Parks out, and they took care of everything. They knew she was going to get arrested. We don't strategize and we just tell her that's not who we are.
Right.
We're smarter than them. How do I know? Because they have scientifically proven that one drop of African American blood or black blood mixed with 15 other bloods, the black blood dominates.
It dominates.
We live in a hemisphere. Hemis is the Latin word for blood, blood environment. The strongest blood is always the strongest person. And God has already given us brilliance. And sometimes they keep telling us the bell curve and all these other things. All of that's nothing but a plot to try and minimize our own trust, faith, and confidence in ourselves. We're the best there is and the best there ever will be. And if the world started where 4 rivers run together, it's just the northern tip of Africa. And therefore, Adam was black. When we begin to understand that, and people ask me, how do you know? I say, because when he came and put a mark on Cain, he made him an albino. So you couldn't help but know who he was. That's how deep scripture is. But having someone who can unfold it and show us how we can unite and get together, we don't have to hurt anybody. We can do to them what they're trying to do to us, and that is let them hurt themselves.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Bishop Tates. You have taken us down several lanes of history and learning, and we do appreciate you, and we hope to have you back on air with us in the future.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am a member of the NAACP.
Yes, sir.
Bless you.
Thank you. All right, that was wonderful. I know we have some comments, and we welcome them. And just before I bring in the next guest, I just want you to know, if you are a new member to the branch, welcome emails are being circulated or going out to educate you on how to get involved. It's more than just a membership. You need to get involved with a committee and join in committee work. That's how we work in this organization. All right, next I'm going to introduce Dr. Alana Curry. She is a board certified psychiatrist and clinical educator, author, and empathy expert. I met her last March on Empathy Day of all days. She is what we call a trauma psychiatrist. And so without further delay, I'm bringing in Dr. Alana Curry. All right, let me just change your name there. All right. So welcome. Let me unmute you. How are you?
I am upright.
You're upright.
I am breathing.
You're breathing.
I am not currently crying or ready to fight somebody, but that, I am angry.
Yes.
And I am here. So that's the honest answer.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And I'm happy you're here because I know, and y'all forgive us if we have a moment, but this is a powerhouse of a woman. And it's interesting that the previous guest, his church is powerhouse. And so just get ready to be equipped by Dr. Alana. So Dr. Alana, thank you so much. Jump right on in and just talk to us.
Well, what I will say is that I do agree that we have to do some very serious work when it comes to trauma right now and understanding trauma. I think that there's no topic that is more important for our mental health than to get to know trauma. So I want to give it a shot to break down for you what's wrong with humans right now. Okay. And when I say what's wrong with humans, I mean all of the 7 billion folks floating on this globe have this same problem. Okay.
one real quick. I'm gonna give you the screen.
Okay.
Okay.
And this thing right here, 7 billion of us are all in primitive mode. Humans are primitive thinkers. And that is the reason why we are seeing the problems that we are seeing right now, because we have a fundamental lack of understanding about ourselves, our body, our brains, and our design. Because we are all a 3-part creature. We are animal, we are human, and we are spirit. We are all 3 of those things anatomically. There's nothing you can do and nothing that can happen to you that is not that will change the makeup of your body and your design. And when I say that, I mean you're an animal, meaning you have biology that dictates your psychology, and your psychology is responsible for what you create. Your thinking, your decision making, it comes out of parts of your brain that you have not been taught about. And these parts of your brain, for example, this is your amygdala. Those parts of your brain are very powerful in creating your emotions, your thoughts, your reactions. And the average human being, they've done studies that show that we use about 10 to 15% of our prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of our brain. This part in here, this beautiful, good green stuff is your CEO, your long-term planner, your best brain, is being overpowered by your biology, your primitive brain, your amygdala, your reticular activating system. I talk about all of these things. I won't go into it here right now, but the important part to understand is that when we're in that mode, we react, and we're not using empathy, and we're not using the best thinking that we can in order to create the world that we want. So you can imagine if you have a bunch of powerful people thinking and energizing primitive, fearful, hateful, angry, red thoughts and energy and actions, what type of hell are you going to make on earth? What will you create for yourself and for other people? And so we have to do some very serious work installing empathy into our thinking and into our understanding, because lack of empathy is a spiritual, emotional, and psychological disease. You make crazy when you cannot the other person's experience and see their humanity and be able to identify them as the same material that you are. And you're humans have a hard time accepting stuff. It took us thousands of years to just accept that the earth rotates around the sun and not the other way around. Because, right, we're a little narcissistic. We like things to be about us. So we have not accepted what science has told us about what humans are. The Human Genome Project was completed in 2008. And that said that we are 99.9% the same. Our DNA, there is way more about us that is the same than is different. But we have focused on the objective, primitive, social labels that we've created that really, there's one human race and a lot of different hues, a lot of different hair types, shapes of nose and ears. But you don't have humans most of the time with ears on their forehead, because our DNA makes us 99.9% the same. So any type of thinking that we're doing that is separating us and calling the other person an unknown other that we can be afraid of because of whatever generalized primitive stuff that we've been exposed to that affects the way we think, we're going to keep reacting to things like that. So I'll get off my soapbox now. I'm mad.
I think it's necessary because the listeners, you can give them things that they can go look for now, right? So it's still an educational thing, and you can never have too much knowledge. Yeah. That's the professor in me. Like, ain't never too much of that. So dealing with this trauma. Yesterday we rallied with the family. We marched. Friday, Black Lives Matter Houston had a march. There's been slab rides for justice. We We ran for Ahmaud. All of this in less than a 1 month span.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Less than 1 month. Black folks are dealing with a lot. And last week, like, the pot just boiled over. It exploded. The pressure cooker. You know, you got rice everywhere, because I said rice, y'all, just so y'all don't get it confused. You know, everything is just exploding on the stove because the heat is so high.
Yeah, I have my stress.
How do we cope? How do we begin to heal and navigate? You know, we were very careful about what we named this episode, but how do we begin to navigate this toxic water that we're in?
Yeah.
You know, that's causing us to take different routes in life. What do we do?
So the first thing that we do is we have to continuously reset and renew our own mind with what we allow to go into your mind, what you allow. So what you put into your eyes and your ears, very important. You have to take your news in small doses. You have to turn off devices sometimes and take moments of quiet. You can find meditations and other things that help to just give you some positive, you know, I keep it real simple, green, red, right? And you have to create, the red is automatic. You're going to get it. You can turn on TV, you can go outside, you can think about what's going on in the world, you're going to get the red. But you have to be intentional about creating the green in your life. So turning off some of that stuff, having moments of playing games with your family, contacting people that you haven't talked to in a long time and just talking to them, try to have positive conversations. Don't just talk about the negative things that are happening. Tell me something good that's going on in your life too. Let's intentionally create a better balance of what we're focused on so that we can draw those positive things to us at the same time. So mindfulness exercises that can help you. Most people operate where their thoughts just do whatever they want to do and they think they don't have control over it. But you do, but you have to practice meditation and mindfulness to understand what I mean about controlling how much you allow yourself to think a thought and controlling how much energy and power you give to negative things. So you can find, like, Houston had a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful march and a beautiful moment where we were able to show the world what it's like to come together over a obviously horrible situation and to do it peacefully. Now I know that it didn't end as well as it could have.
It ended beautifully.
But there also have been people who have reported being harassed by the police as things were clearing out. So that's sort of the point. Like, we have to be able to look at things in nuances, that it's not just a black or white thing. It's not just one version or the other. All of us are experiencing, we're all having the same conversation, and everybody is thinking about it differently because our brain is going to interpret it differently and reference different situations and reference different experiences. And we have to learn how to take all of those things into account and understand that that's healthy thinking. And that's where, like, yes, things are terrible right now. And there's some serious positives to us finally talking about the stanky, funky, pus-filled wound of America and actually having real conversations and hearing people respond. Like, their corporations, people who have been silent for far too long are going, oh, racism. I guess we do need to work on that. It didn't just go away when Obama got elected. No, it didn't. And it's clearly problematic. So now we can have conversations, but the thing that we have to do as Black folks of African descent, folks with pigment, everybody's of African descent, if you want to tell the truth about it. If we are talking about science, we're talking about history. I like that the bishop, I think, brought up how we've gotten here longitudinally, because the earth is about 4 billion years old. The human species is a very young species in earth. We've only been on this rock for a relatively short amount of time. So we think just because we're technologically advanced that we actually are psychologically advanced, and we're not. We're not psychologically advanced, in part because we don't get a good education about this thing here, and this body and this brain, our emotions. We do not have, emotions are the one thing that every single human being that's ever lived in any time or era or place on the earth, that's the language of those human beings of the soul. You angry, happy, fearful, sad, you have to be able to see and understand invisible things to understand this entire system and how it works. But we have not been taught about our emotions, so we are an emotionally incompetent species. And that is impacting the way that we relate to each other and the way that we act out our emotions. So we have to learn to turn our anger into healthier things. I'm still going to be angry, but I have to learn to make that anger fuel for the next step and the next step and the next step, and not allow it to hurt me or hurt myself or hurt my community in my anger, because what's underneath that anger is always other emotions. And most deeply underneath anger is fear. So understanding and labeling your emotions, talking about them, talking about your traumas, talking about how you're feeling, and just allowing yourself to release them. Have a good cry. I got a whole playlist that I made where, like, when I just need to have a cry and just be like, dag blasted, just let it out and be like, God, what is happening here? Kirk and Fred reminded me that they have some good tools. And I pulled out some of that and I just cry. But when you cry, you release chemicals that help combat stress hormones. And it's actually a strong, healthy thing to do, to release anger in a way of crying instead of cussing out your friends or your family, or snapping on folks, or popping off on your kids, or going and breaking the window, or grab, or go steal some stuff, or beat somebody up. Or, like, we have so many ways that we allow our amygdala, the part of us that creates our emotions, to dictate our behavior and what we do. And we can't just blame that on white people. Now we got to do our own work too, of learning to control our emotions better.
So real quick, give me the name of that part of the brain, the
amygdala.
Amygdala. Okay. Somebody put that in the comments for me. So how do give us maybe two or three tools that people can utilize to kind of control that portion of our brain, and use some of the other percentage. What did you say? We use about 10 to 15% of our brain?
10% of our brain. Okay.
So help us tap into that other 85.
Your first tool. Okay. So can you see that? The love skill. The love skill is an empathy skill. Now, a lot of people are like, Doc, why do I have to have empathy for people who are mistreating me? And I don't care nothing about your empathy and what you talk about. Okay, but hear me out, because empathy is a superpower. And empathy is a way of seeing more of the picture than from your own little bubble that your biology can generate. It is you raising and elevating your thinking to use your prefrontal cortex and look deeper at what's happening between you and that other person. So you want to do this because it will make you more powerful, not because you're going down low and wrestling on the ground with the other animals. So L is listen and look with suspended judgment, meaning when somebody's saying something to you, no matter what it is that they're saying, be listening and looking. But we know that we're going to draw a conclusion. It's human to draw conclusions. Your brain is constantly making small judgments, microsecond judgments about what's going on in your environment, because that's what it's supposed to do in order to function, right? But your primitive brain systems get the information before your prefrontal cortex. So you have to slow down and put your version to the side. O, observe the emotions in yourself and the other person involved, the other creator involved, and put words to it. What am I feeling? What is going on inside of me? Am I feeling upset by what they said? Do I feel offended? Do I feel disgusted or angry and jealous and other things like that? Not just anger words, but go deeper with what are they saying. If somebody says something to me that I find horrifying, I may not let that play out on the outside, but I have to acknowledge inside myself, like I'm offended by what they said, or I feel defensive about what they said, because that's going to affect my communication. And looking at what's going on inside of them, what emotions are they having? Where are they on the spectrum, red or green? And how do I need to control myself in order to get the outcome that I want? V, validate the differing perspectives. We are not going to be in agreement, or there probably wouldn't be any rocking and rolling of my amygdala. But if you're telling me your version and I'm telling you my version, our versions are going to be different. We're going to have different language. We're going to have different interpretation. We're seeing this every day. We're looking at the same scene on TV, and somebody's like, it's a rioter, them damn looters. And somebody else is like, these are protesters that have a legitimate and valid trauma and concern. And so how we're going to come to this from two different places, but it's okay, because I'm right, I'm a little right and you a little right, and I'm a little wrong and you a little wrong. We have to be able to see and use better language to understand each other. So validate the perspectives. I don't have to agree with you to say, okay, I see why you see it that way. E, express yourself skillfully, creator, meaning that you have to remember that you are either going to create the primitive version of this, or you're going to create the evolved version that actually gets accomplished what you want accomplished. And if you let your amygdala write the script for what you're about to say or do at that particular moment, you probably are not going to be getting the version that you want. So being intentional about paying attention to, how is this other person seeing me? That's empathy. How is the other person experiencing me? Am I choosing words that are going to make it across this space and land in that other person's prefrontal cortex in a way that they can hear me effectively, and not me slapping them with my words invisibly and creating more trauma instead of understanding? That's one skill, the love skill. That's the empathy skill, because it's love in action. Okay. The last thing that go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna do another skill, but actually I should stop and ask.
I have a question.
Yeah.
A comment. What do you mean that we are animals? Can you break that down a little more?
Well, we are animals. Humans are animals. We're not plants. There's only a few forms of life that we recognize, and we do fall under the mammal category. We're vertebrates. We are the highest animal on earth in terms of our brain being evolved and developed to understand ourselves and know ourselves, but we still have biology and brain systems and instincts and behavior patterns that drive our society just like any other animal does. We just have we have a higher responsibility, because we also hopefully should know ourselves a little better and be able to make better decisions and control our part of reality. So I think we actually don't like to think of ourselves as animals, but if you don't understand this biology and what this thing will have you doing, you'll be blaming it on everybody else and blaming it on the devil too, without recognizing that it's coming from inside of you.
Thank you. And thank you for that question. I see we have people watching from YouTube and Facebook. Okay. This is a text question, so we're going to make this one quick because I want to give you time to close out. Actually, I'm going to let Portia ask it.
Okay.
Hi, Portia. Unmute your mic.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Alana. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just had a question. So today, I had a meeting for my work, and it's a couple of us that are Black, and the majority of everyone else is white. And they gave us space today to kind of express how we felt. And initially, I was just like really quiet because I didn't want like rage to come out, right? Or I didn't want like emotions. I didn't want them to see me cry, which I ultimately ended up crying, which is why I kind of held back. But how do we, once we go back in those environments, and I know a lot of us have had our friends and allies from other races like reach out to us, but how do we kind of handle like going back into that environment after having such a traumatic event and experiencing this range of emotions? How do we go back into that environment and, function and then not be, upset or not? You know what I mean? How do we handle that when we go back in those environments?
So one thing that I'll say is that you don't worry about not being upset, because you're going to be upset. And I think that they could benefit from seeing and being a little uncomfortable and being, we've had a space where white people have been able to exist in a delusional system that doesn't make them have to understand and tolerate other people's negative emotions, because everything has catered towards if I upset you or make you mad or step on the wrong line, I could be lynched or or whatever consequences could happen. So that also means that they have not been accustomed to having to do any significant emotional work. Thank goodness being Black has allowed us to be, even though the trauma has been painful, it has made us really emotionally very resilient. So I would encourage you to, one, allow yourself to show your emotions and have them, because they're programmed in your body and brain. And that's okay if you do have that. But I will give you a tool. You can text Dear Man to, I'll read it out to you. Text DEAR space MAN to 832-772-2129. I'll read it again. You're going to text 832-772-2129 and send the words Dear, DEAR space man, MAN, to that number. And it'll ask for your email address, and then it will provide you with a link to a Dear Man worksheet. This is my favorite tool, Dear Man. So you'll be able to download this worksheet. And this tool is a tool from dialectical behavioral therapy. And it's a great tool for when you are upset and you want to come up with better words, because none of our brain is working great when we are feeling emotional, and when like your amygdala is storming. It's hard to find those best words, but they're in there. So Dear Man is D, describe the facts of the situation. And that's just being very objective. That's not throwing any colorful words in there, no opinions. And we can go through an example, but I'll just go through it real quick. So the D, describe the facts of the situation. E, express your feelings in I statements, or your opinions in I statements. So like, I feel, not you this or you that, just I am feeling this. And then okay. A, assert what you want or the boundary you're setting. And so that's basically where I start with A, by the way, when I'm thinking through this in my mind. What do I want to say? What's the purpose of these words coming out of my mouth? Because there's no point in me talking if I'm launching these words without a purpose. And right. Then R, reinforce why they will want to do what you asserted. So let me give you an example. I'm just throwing it, of course, because I don't know the situation other than what you told me, but what a Dear Man might have sounded like in that situation. Okay. Ask me what they asked you. Put me on the spot.
Well, they just said, like, tell us like how you're feeling and like how you're handling all of this that's going on. But of course, this is a white woman asking a Black woman how I feel. And there's two of us, or there's three of us actually. And then the other individuals that were on the Zoom call are okay. white. So okay. It's just, how are you feeling? How are you handling all of this that's going on?
Okay. Now, before I start this, I want to answer the question. I see somebody put, do you recommend the Dear Man tool for dealing with all triggers surrounding racism? Yes, I recommend it for all triggers. And if you want to specify it to racism, that's fine. But this is for all triggers, any traumas, any time that you need to. I use Dear Man in low intensity situations. I practice it so that I can have it ready for the high intensity situations. So I ask my teenager to sometimes to wash the dishes or do her chores the way she needs to, using a Dear Man, so that
Okay.
If a white person randomly asks me after I have watched multiple deaths of Black and brown people, which I would need that dear man in that moment to keep from saying something, you know how it happens. So I would maybe say something like, I've had a really tough time with the deaths of so many African Americans and so many racism involved incidents happening right now, especially on top of the stress of coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
I feel vulnerable. I feel anxious just answering this question for you, because as a Black woman, being honest about my feelings in this environment has not been welcome historically. So
Right.
I would like to ask us to have more of these type of conversations so that we can be part of the solution that has to happen. And the reason that you will want to do that is because you probably feel that you probably have felt that we're in a post-racial society. So now that you know that we're not, obviously, I would like for us to make a coherent and cohesive plan about what we as a team and organization are going to do to level the playing field, or in fact, upgrade everyone to the psychology, the God complex of whiteness, instead of only y'all getting to play in the sun. Oh, that the last part I lost control of. All that. But you know what I'm saying? So the Dear Man is really just about helping to pull out better words from your brain and giving you a roadmap to do that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I appreciate it. I did all of that. I requested it. They sent it to me. So it's like instantaneous, guys. I did that as we were talking. So thank you so much, Dr. Alana, for that. And I will definitely share that. We've shared it on our site, one of the comments. So thank you.
And it's on the screen too. So it's on the banner.
Yes. And if you want to learn more of these free tips, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. On Thursdays, I do Trauma Thursdays on Facebook at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We'll be talking more about the trauma of racism tomorrow with myself and another psychiatrist, Dr. Dawn. And you can go to the TraumaRecoveryAcademy.com, and there's a course on there for $1 a month, empathy skills practice for traumatized humans, breaking down for you what trauma does to your brain, your biology, and your behavior. And yeah, go check it out, TraumaRecoveryAcademy.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Portia, for coming in. And so, Dr. Alana, before you go, I know you said we can follow you on those platforms. Is it Dr. Alana on all of them?
Yep.
Right. So y'all have that. Her website is dralana.com.
Yes, Trauma Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Okay. And then I just want to mention, because you didn't, you have an audiobook.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forget.
Wake Up.
Wake Up.
So Wake Up is available. Is that on the website as well?
It's on the dralana.com website.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us, giving us tools. I can't say the first tool you gave me, not on this show. I'll text it to you. It starts with an S.
I got you. I got you. I didn't know if I was allowed, so I didn't do that one today.
Not between two clergy members. I will leave that out. But we really do appreciate you. These are some really good tools as we do navigate our trauma, because this is the beginning of a movement like most of my generation, our generation, we haven't seen this, and so there are a lot of emotions. I don't think I've cried yet. I wanted to, I kind of sniffled, but I need that deep, ugly, doing that type of cry. I need that. You better go get in the shower.
I'll send you a playlist and have you on the floor.
Well, we definitely thank you for joining us. We welcome you back to come and visit us and share with us, and maybe even bring Dr. Dawn. Do you offer any counseling?
No.
No. Okay.
because there's one of me, and there's 7 billion traumatized humans running around that need to understand how their brain and body and behavior is affected. So I primarily create educational tools, which is why the website is there and the trainings are there. And I encourage people to go there first. And then if they have questions after that, they can ask them. I have a Facebook group called Why People that they can join, and they can ask those questions if they have them about why we do the things that we do.
Okay. Well, that is Dr. Alana, ladies and gentlemen. Again, you can text Dear Man to 832-772-2129. And you can follow her on all social media platforms at Dr. Alana. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you soon.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I'm bring Portia back in. Portia, you want to give us a few announcements?
Yes, absolutely. So we've been talking about elections over the past few weeks. So I just want to encourage everybody to keep in mind there's a runoff election on July 14th. Early voting starts on June 29th and runs through July 2nd, then on the 5th, and then the 6th through the 10th. The last day to register to vote, if you are not registered to vote, is on June 15th. So that's just 12 days from now. So we have launched a partnership with Move Texas to help you get registered to vote. Texas doesn't have online voter registration, but what Move Texas is doing is if you will go to their website, movetexas.org, you can fill out a ballot and they'll send it to you. You'll just sign it and put it in the mail. So if you are not registered to vote right now, you can go to movetexas.org and sign up for a registration form to be sent to you that you can mail in before the June 15th deadline. Also, I just want to encourage July, put the link in our comment section. NAACP, of course, is a membership power organization. We have power through numbers. I'm so excited to see the number, all the people that listed that they are new members to the organization. So thank you all so much for making that commitment. It's just $30 a year. So you'll be a member from June 3rd of 2020 to June 3rd of 2021 for $30. But as I always say, if you want a deeper, more long-lasting commitment in the relationship with NAACP, I urge you and encourage you to become a subscribing life member or become a life member today, not necessarily subscribing. $750 for a lifetime silver life membership. And that can be paid in equal amounts of $75 for 10 years. Or if you're like myself, you want to double up here and there, you can pay that off in as little amount of time as you need. So power in numbers, we need you. And we just appreciate everybody that has joined our organization over the past several weeks as we've done this show.
Yeah, and we just want to remind you, when you join, make sure that you determine which areas you want to work in and then communicate with those, either with the branch directly, which is branch at NAACPHouston.org. It's very important that you put .org. And they can help direct you to those committee chairs so that you can get involved in this work. I am the chair of the Community Coordination Committee, and Portia is Young Adult Committee, and we work in concert with each other quite often. Like this show is our product. Our committees have combined to do this show. So without further delay, Portia, I'm gonna keep you on for a second. Okay. Bring in Dre, and we're going to bring in Pastor Mark Graffenreid of Windsor Village Church Family. Hey, Pastor Mark.
Hey, long time no see.
I know. I don't think Dre is available.
Okay.
I just saw you yesterday.
Yes.
So good to see you.
Good to be seen.
Yeah. So, Pastor Mark, you've become like our pastor.
Pastor.
I'm sharing you with them, with the world. But no, just kidding. But we thank you for praying for the show and just being there for the production team over these last couple of weeks. So, we wanted you to come on to just talk to us. I know you did it with the guys the last time you were on, but just talking to us about dealing with this trauma, dealing with living in this beautiful black skin, but facing so much disruption, I would say, and so much hatred and having to compartmentalize and wear masks. You know, we wearing masks because of COVID-19, but if we're honest with ourselves, we've been wearing masks a long time because, you know, what they call it, code switching. You know, that's trauma, and all of that is coming off right now. So just give us some skills, some tools to navigate.
Well, first I want to affirm your feelings, and again, thank you for having me on again today. It's a joy, honor, and privilege to be with you all. And this is not going to be a conversation that is a one-time conversation. These are conversations that have to continue. And unfortunately, people have died that have triggered, you know, these conversations. But in terms of, you know, the how-to, you know, Dr. Alani was on earlier, and I don't want to get into a medical lane or a lane that's not designed for me. So I can only speak to, you know, more of the spiritual sides and aspects of it. So if you'll allow me to do that, then I will. But as people of African ancestry, there have been so many assaults, ASSAULTS, upon our skin, that the resilience that Dr. Alani spoke of is, it's amazing that we're still here. We have dealt with so much, and it just continues to escalate to the point that, you know, the incidence of mental health is such a disproportionately higher number in our communities than there are other communities. The situation that we saw with George Floyd is just the latest situation that was actually recorded. There are thousands and thousands of these that will never go make the publicity that it has. I say all that to say that it is okay to feel the emotions that you feel. God gave us all these emotions, but God also tells us what to do with them too. God wouldn't have told us not to be anxious if he knew we would be anxious. He says, be anxious, you know, don't be anxious because I'm going to supply all that you need. He wouldn't say, don't worry if he knew we would worry. He says, be angry, but don't sin. Don't sin. He didn't tell us not to be angry. He just said, don't sin while you're angry. So all of these emotions, an omnipotent, meaning all powerful, omniscient, all knowing God, omnipresent everywhere all at the same time, created all of us. And we used to sing it in children's church. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Red, yellow, black, and white, they're all precious in his sight. Jesus loves the children of the world. Well, that's affirmed in our scriptures, that we're all made in God's image. We are image bearers, and everybody who's watching today, you are a spitting image of God. It just is unfortunate that people who look like us have had our image even more distorted. Sin did a lot to distort everybody's image, but sin is really, you know, hurt all of us, to not allow us to see the God in each other. But these emotions that each of us feels, they're real and they're raw. And I just want us as people to not bypass that. We've been resilient for so long, and we've dealt with so many things that we just move on to the next thing, that where this becomes normalized. And we can't normalize this. I refuse for it to be normalized for me. And so I saw you kind of wiping and I know that wasn't mascara, but those were the tears that you've wanted to cry. Yeah. Those are the tears that people need to see us cry. And Portia, I heard you earlier talking about, your colleagues wanting to know how you feel. Well, my question to them would be, how does this make you feel?
Ooh.
And we did ask them. They gave a chance for everybody to go around. And honestly, like my colleagues, another Black girl, like spoke up pretty early in the conversation, but it was two of us that kind of like waited to hear what everybody else was going to say, and then we decided to share our stories. But it was interesting. I mean, they just said they were sad. They wish that they could do something.
Wow. Just sad.
That was really just sad. And yeah.
So, for example, I believe the intent of what your colleagues were saying were appropriate. The intent. There's a difference between the intent and the impact. Okay. The intent and the impact, when those line up, that's a really good thing. So I'll share an experience that I had yesterday. Yes, people from all races were at the rally, and I was grateful to see such a cross-section of our community in that place, 60-something thousand strong. And I think that's representative of Houston. Houston's is just as kind of this melting pot. But as we were marching toward downtown City Hall, I felt some kind of way when I saw, say, my Anglo counterparts say, "I can't breathe." And so I'm looking at them like, why you can't breathe? The intent of what they were saying was correct. But the way it was packaged, it was like, I'm sure there are people who are not of African ancestry that identify with our plight or try to empathize with our plight, the word that Dr. Alani used earlier. But it was difficult for me to hear that. And I'm looking, and I'm like, yes, we're marching, but in my mind, my circumstances wouldn't allow me to perhaps think, okay, well, why is it that you couldn't breathe, as an Anglo person? Because our experience is your privilege. There's privilege, and then there's our experience. And so your colleagues expressing that does, I believe, hopefully come from a genuine place. The wishing I could do something about it is probably, if I had heard that, I probably would have been impacted. I probably would have been hurt by that comment as well, because it's going to take all of us at the table, all of us at the polls, all of us when it's time to have local elections. It's not just about the presidential election. It's these local elections, state elections that get bypassed by many of us. And think about it. The turnout is not nearly as what it ought to be on the local level as it is on the national level, because we believe that if the national level is fixed, then everything else is going to fall into place. And I would suggest that the contrary is true, and that your mayors, your chiefs of police, your county commissioners, your local officials, your council persons, your state and state reps, senators and reps, those are the people who are going to impact policy right where you are. And
district attorneys.
I'm sorry.
District attorneys.
DAs, all of that. And that's a great point, because the judges, federal judges are appointed. They're not elected. They're appointed by the president. State judges are elected. Criminals, federal, all of that. And so we've got to show up in those numbers, just as we did yesterday. And I left wondering what next, what's the next step? Because it's great, because all of us can go back to our spheres of influence, our circles and our communities, which may or may not be safe, depending on what your circumstances are. But at the end of the day, how do we capture that momentum and continue to ride it to a place that does result in changes in public policy and how it's implemented. Because a book on a law on the books is one thing, but how it's implemented and who they impact isn't always proportionate, just to put it lightly.
All right, we have a comment from Stephen Goldsmith.
Steve.
There you go. Can we appreciate our Anglo brothers and sisters for rolling up their sleeves and jumping in? Dr. King said Injustice Anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere. I say yes. We can appreciate.
And I agree, because if we look at the civil rights movement, as many of us have read about in our textbooks, none of us got where we are now without the assistance of all people, all people. When you see the marches and Dr. King, he does have rabbis, he does have Anglo clergy, he does have people of all races. So I'm not saying that there's no place for them. It was the rhetoric that was a little bit problematic to me. Justice is one thing. Saying you can't breathe, to me, is another thing. And so I don't want to confuse the two, because injustice is what we saw. So I have no problem with anybody hollering for justice to roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream, as Amos 5:24 says. But I do wonder sometimes how we coexist together in a way that people really believe that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It can't just be us saying that. It can't just come up in your Zoom meeting portion. These are systemic problems that, but for George Floyd, would we still just kind of be riding steady?
And I'll say, like, in our meeting, I have one of my other coworkers, she's Hispanic, but she shared something about her uncle being shot by a local police officer. It was like over a decade ago, but still, like, she cried, right? So then that empowered me in a way for me to share the fact that my dad had been brutalized by the police as well.
Yeah.
So in that, they were like, it was like an aha moment. They were like, wow, like, we had no clue that you guys had experienced this personal trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it allowed them to see a little bit more of that. Like, this is stuff that's not, it's common, right? It's not, that's 2 people out of 7 people on this call that this has happened to. So it's not, it's real. And I think that's what I actually stress that to them. Like, this is real, y'all. This is trauma. And I know we handle it well, and we don't show it on a day-to-day basis because we come in here and we smile and we're, genuinely happy people, but we deal with there's some stuff underneath there that you guys don't know. But it was a space, I think it was good for them to know that about us, but at the same time, like, it is truly a question, is like, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. Like, y'all know this about us, but how are you gonna, help move the conversation forward, since this is so common in our lives?
That was Dr. King's last published book. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? In 1967, June 1967, he wrote things in that book that, in my personal opinion, got him killed. He was already on everybody's radar. But Dr. King said, in order for us to get where we need to go, we need to guarantee an income for every American. Think about that. Guaranteeing people an income. And at the time he wrote that book, the gross national product of America isn't nearly what it is today. Mm-hmm. He said, we have the resources to guarantee everybody an income. Education. Everybody needs to have access to a quality education. He also talked about the war on poverty, hunger, hopelessness. So George Floyd is a microcosm, in my opinion, of greater issues. The rioting that people talk about, as Dr. King said, that is the voice of the unheard, but it's also a voice of hopelessness because of the economic ceilings that are placed upon us, the disproportionate and disparities that we see in our educational system, our legal system, our judicial system, our healthcare system. All of those are just little pieces, if you will, to what ultimately resulted in 8 minutes and 46 seconds on a man's throat. Because essentially, we didn't need COVID-19 to expose this pandemic called racism that we have been living since we were brought over here. COVID has only magnified it. The pandemic was already here. And if you think about this, in the Bible, when Moses was born, Pharaoh sent out a law that said, kill all the boys. It's right there in Exodus, the first chapter. They're becoming more numerous than us. Let us deal shrewdly with them. Kill all of the males. When Christ was born, in the New Testament, in Luke's gospel, Caesar had the same thing. Kill all the males. So this is deeply ingrained in a place that a lot of what we're seeing now, those declarations, those laws were carried out years and centuries ago, and we're seeing it. It took an Emmett Till to be killed from Chicago, who was visiting his family in Money, Mississippi in 54 for the civil rights movement to really begin. Because the idea was, if they will do this to one of our children, there's no telling what they'll do to us, which they were already doing. But that sparked a movement, and George Floyd may be for many of us, and there are countless others prior to him. Alton Sterling, Eric Garner, who first said, I can't breathe, Trayvon Martin, and the list goes on and on. The 16th Street Baptist Church, 4 little girls who go into church, minding their own business. So there's been trauma upon our people that when you've been treated as property, you've been treated as subhuman, then we were 3/5 of a person. And then once you finally recognize that I am a person, there's this inferiority, superiority that you project onto what you perceive to be my inferiority, that we've gone through all of these levels of trauma, and we continue to do it as a people. And it's not something that we're going to get out of overnight. We didn't get in this situation overnight. We're not going to get out of this situation overnight. But I want this to be clear. I affirm everybody who is about this justice movement. And I want all of us to come to the table when it's time. But it's going to be beyond a march, because nobody cares about you marching. When you start impacting the money, the education systems, and the things that matter to those in power, that's when you get their attention.
Pastor Mark, I've continuously been asked, or I've heard people say, who is going to lead us? And I had an epiphany that the reason why we ask that question is because we have been conditioned to be told what to do. And so my thing is, look in the mirror. Your leader is in the mirror.
I agree.
But that's what people are hungering for. Even people I would think would know better, or maybe it's just that desperation because somebody has to guide this. It's so crazy. Someone has to come bring order. I was listening to CNN, something I rarely do. I don't like watching the news, but I was listening to Chris Cuomo. I actually miss our national president, Derek Johnson, on Jimmy Fallon, because I was listening to CNN, but he kept saying, where are the leaders? Where are the leaders? Where are the leaders? And I don't think his intent was to make people question it. It was him begging for somebody to step up. But I think that's the wrong message to send. Like, if we continue to wait for someone to lead us, it's like, what happens when they're taken away? Do we not continue to go? And I think that's what happened to us during the civil rights movement. They took away Dr. King, they took away Malcolm, they tried to take down Angela, she wanted a few people ever to be the federal case. They took down the brother in Chicago. Just where would we be if we had a Fred Hampton, right? Mm-hmm. Fred Hampton was so young. Like, I think he's like my brother's age. Like, where would we be if we had a Fred Hampton? But this whole idea of like, you need a leader, they can't kill us all. We all are leaders. How do we get people to recognize that? I know people say, well, what is the church doing? I mean, the church can say that, but everybody don't go to church, so how do we get our community? What is it that we say to our children, to our neighbors, to anybody? I know yesterday, a young man next to me, we're on the front row. He just started going off, like his frustration just hit him. And I turned to him and I touched him. I said, I love you. And those 3 words just brought him down. And he started nodding his head. And the more he nodded, the more I said it. Because I didn't want his rage to be a reason for the law enforcement to have to come over there, right?
Sure.
I'm just aggravated. Again, I know I need to cry, but like, where do we go?
Just cry, girl. Just
I
cry.
know. I don't know why he ain't let me cry yet. I'm trying. I want to.
Yeah.
Where do we go from chaos or community?
Yeah, I pray that the answer to Dr. King's question is community and not chaos. He poses the question because we have a choice in the matter. And Dr. King talked about the evil triplets in that last book. The evil triplets that he identified were militarism, poverty, and racism.
Wow.
The evil triplets. We're escalating wars. You're speaking about Vietnam at the time. We are turning our backs on poverty, and this whole idea of this pandemic, so to speak. I mean, he was so prophetic, even then. But he called them the evil triplets, and I believe that if we don't address those, then we are going to rewrite history. In terms of a leader, I agree that we are leaders, and forget who said it, but the quote is, "We're who we're waiting for." We are who we're waiting for, and so at the end of the day, it's going to be grassroots organizations, and NAACP isn't grassroots by any stretch. It started that way, but the feet on the ground in the community, ACLU, all of these organizations, we're going to have to really put our hearts and our minds together, because I think what's lacking more than a leader is an agenda, and an agenda. In other words, if somebody said, okay, Black Lives Matter, we hear you. What are your demands? I think we'd have some semblance of an idea of what that would look like, but I'm not sure we'd be able to articulate it with the particularity and the specificity that we're going to need to. When Dr. King and all those that our predecessors who we were born into this, some of us are civil rights babies, so to speak. I heard you mention that earlier, but every move was calculated. Every move was directed toward an end. When they knew Rosa Parks was going to sit down, that was something that they decided was going to be done. And for a whole year, they boycotted that Montgomery public transit system. Economics, when they realized, you know what, we're losing thousands and thousands of dollars a day because these people are going to walk instead of ride segregated buses and spend their money, that's when something happened. It took a Selma march and a Bloody Sunday, for something to on live TV.
Yeah.
That was live, just like this George Floyd thing was live. And the horror around the world should reverberate. And so when we get to the table, and I believe we will get to the table, that's why I said when, not if. When we get to the table, I think in terms of a leader, it'd be great to have someone emerge. And that's really kind of what I think Cuomo was saying. Who's in charge here? Because people were always able to identify the civil rights movement with Dr. King, Thurgood Marshall, and all of those people in those different areas, Julian Bond, and on and on. We have leaders around this country. And it's up to us to put our heads together, but we need an agenda more than that. And I think once that agenda is identified, then I think the rightful leaders will come toward that agenda. But the trauma of this all is real, and it's important that we not move past this quickly. Because we do need to have these conversations with our children, with our communities, with our churches, and as a pastor on staff at a church, we're doing. All of our pastors were there. I'm not knocking any pastor that wasn't, but it was important for us to know, hey, we're down here and we're in the midst of this, and if we're not careful. We will also fulfill one of Dr. King's great concerns too, as a church. And he said, the younger generations are frustrated with the church because it's become an irrelevant social institution. Mm-hmm. This is Dr. King saying this in this last book, or in his letter from the Birmingham jail. I apologize for the source of the misquote, but he said, it's become an irrelevant institution. And I'm not saying the church is irrelevant, but it's great that we're doing and spreading the gospel, but Jesus was also about justice too. When he said, hey, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to recover sight to the blind, heal the brokenhearted, set the captives free, deliver the downtrodden. This was a civil right. He was announcing the civil rights movement at that time in Luke 4. And right after that, they tried to kill him. Right after he announced his mission statement, they tried to kill him. So the church has got to find its place when it comes to social justice issues, feeding the hungry, and sharing the gospel, because all of that is gospel sharing. It's not just that Jesus came and died, and that is the gospel. But how we live that out, pleading for the widow, feeding the hungry, pleading for the orphan, being concerned about the least, the last, and the lost. That's where things are gonna change. And I look forward to being part of that change.
Yeah. Oh.
Right.
Well, we got
Thank you.
Comments. I'm gonna step out. Portia, you can continue with.
Okay. I appreciate all that you said. So last night we had an all-unit call for NAACP, and it's something that you said. Our president, Derek Johnson, mentioned. He just said that marching has to have a focus, right? So we can protest, we can march, we can do all these things, but it has to have a focus and a result in mind. So if we were to think of this, and we're not planning a march right now, but if we were, like, what would you say our end result should be? I know that's a heavy question, and multi-layered, but what do you think if we have people saying, like, what's our end result in all of this? You said we don't want to move past it quickly, but what should that end result that we're working towards be?
I believe it should be centered around 3 E's. Economics, education, and empowerment. Economics, education, and empowerment. So many of our schools in our communities are underfunded, understaffed, and the test scores that these students give out are, I believe, a reflection of secondhand disproportionalities in education. Economically, we need to support our African American businesses. The dollars that we spend in our communities, the life cycle of a dollar in the African American community is not nearly as long as it is in other communities, say the Jewish community or the Muslim community or whatever. They recycle that dollar within their communities because they support one another. When we take our dollar, we go off, somewhere else, and it may have a lifespan of maybe one turnover. The beauty shops, barber shops, we're gonna be good with them. We're gonna visit them. We're gonna patronize those. But I think we're gonna have to do more supporting of Black businesses, more economic empowerment of our own communities, better education in our school system, our public school system, and then empowerment. And when I say empowerment, having people in position, like a mayor, like a chief of police, like people who are the movers and the shakers and the policy makers. We're going to need to be at that table because a lot of the laws that have been created didn't have us in mind in the first place. And when they are applied, you see the disproportionate effects of that. The federal sentencing guidelines is one example. You get this much of cocaine and you out of there. I mean, 5-10 years, and the judge has that discretion just for like a tea bag. Forget that, a sweet and low pack of cocaine or anything like that. So if you talk about major drugs, you're done. You're done. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to be done, but I think they all center around economics, education, and an empowerment. And I there are obviously specifics to those ideas, but ultimately those are the buckets, in my opinion, that when we feel we have empowerment with our money and with our businesses and with the development of the communities in which we live and the education system, because those go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. Then I think that sense of empowerment is there. Again, voting is one of the first ways that we have to do that. And I want to encourage everybody in every primary that's available, vote early, vote as many times as they let you vote, because we can't afford to allow these elections to go by. We're coming up on runoffs from earlier this March, and everybody's focused on November, but we got something right here in between, and a new sheriff and a new such and such, and they're going to be in place, and we're like, oh my goodness. Right. But we were focused on the bigger picture when the local level is going to be what really impacts us. So again, empowerment, economics, and education would be things that we have got to bring to the table.
Wow. Well, thank you, Pastor Mark. Can you tell us where people can follow you on social media, your Instagram?
Yeah, I'm new to social media, believe it or not, but you can follow me at Mark Graffenreid on Facebook and Instagram. You can also follow anything that I'm doing or the church is doing at Windsor Village Church Family, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, because much of what we're doing, I'm just a branch on a tree in terms of my church family that's doing all of these things. And so you can follow me, Mark Graffenreid, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, I'm sorry, or you can follow the Windsor Village Church Family on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So thank you.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you and to see you.
Anytime.
We thank you for being the pastor of our show.
Oh, you're so kind.
The men.
And I want you to cry. I want you to cry.
I am. I will. And I'll text y'all when I do it.
Yeah, don't text me. I don't text me, but we've got to grieve. We've definitely got to grieve this because that's part of the healing process.
Yeah.
The shock and the numbness that many of us feel right now, hopefully won't go away soon, but there is this process that we need to go through.
I think I'm just mad as hell right now.
And that's okay. That is okay. Again,
and it's all in here, all in these shows.
Yeah. I it looked like you were working out, but
I was trying.
Yeah. But like I said, God gave us all of these emotions. He wired us with all of these emotions, and he knows exactly the feelings that you have. He does give us instruction on how to use those emotions. Yeah. And so the anger and the fear and all of those things, frustration, feeling voiceless, all of those things are relevant. Again, I want to affirm them and just know that we're gonna make it, but it's gonna be in community. It's not gonna be in isolation. It's gonna be in community. So keep doing the work that you all are both doing. It is meaningful to more people than you know, particularly our quote millennials, because they're really looking for answers and action. And you all are a ready, credible source for that action. And so continue to keep doing the work, and don't grow weary in well doing.
Right.
Don't grow weary in well doing.
Thanks.
He wouldn't have said that if he knew we weren't going to be weary. Do not grow in well doing, and you're doing well, good work. But he said in due season. Due season. I heard Dr. Cosby say this over at Wheeler Avenue. He said there's winter, spring, summer, fall, but there's also due season. DUE. That is any time. Whenever God decides to move, there's always due season. So you'll reap a harvest if you don't faint. That's the promise.
Thank you so much.
You're doing well.
Thank you so much, Pastor Mark. I'll see you Sunday in Drive Up service.
Drive Up. Yeah, that's right. We have a drive-in service this weekend. So if you don't have a church home, or if you want to come by the Windsor Village Church family, this weekend we're having a drive-in worship celebration. We obviously are watching the weather. We're watching the storm that's brewing out there, but stay tuned. We'd love to have you. We're having 3 worship services at 6 a.m. Yes, I said 6 a.m. For all you early portions said, I don't want none of that.
I was
6 a.m. Because, folk come to sunrise service, don't they? Yeah.
They do.
6 a.m., 8 a.m., and 10 a.m. because we're trying to get out of there before the sun, starts sitting on our skin. But we're going to give God glory. It'll be first weekend. Bring your own communion, and please, come by the village, 6011 West Orem Drive, Houston, Texas, 77085. Our village is your village, and you're always welcome at the village. So again, I'll see you there.
All right. Well, we appreciate you, and we'll be in touch.
All right. God bless y'all.
God bless you too.
God bless you too.
Bye. All right, Portia, that was powerful.
Yes, it was.
I know we've gone longer. It seems like the last couple of weeks we've had longer shows, but that's what happens when you run your own platform. You can do what you want to do. You don't have no commercial breaks.
Right.
I know that President Obama was speaking as we started. So that was taking place. This show, this broadcast is readily available both on Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to share those links with others and you want them to hear a particular thing, you can send them the link and say, hey, fast forward to XYZ minute so that they can capture that. We have pinned a comment that has a link to our membership. And as you're joining, I know many of you have recently joined. Don't think that we don't know you've joined. You have to remember that you're joining a national organization that is based out of Baltimore with branches in, I want to say all 50 states, but around the country.
48, I think, yeah.
Okay, but around the country, the branches are, and we're in the middle of a pandemic known as COVID-19, as well as the pandemic that's been here, the injustice pandemic that's been here for centuries. So having said that, our typical office settings are not how we're operating right now. Our own branch is closed and we're all working. And when I say working, I mean volunteering, virtually. So just bear with us. We know that you're joining and we appreciate it. If you're interested in a particular committee, I do recommend that you contact our branch email and just let them know. Our website is naacphouston.org. If someone could type that in the comments, naacphouston.org. If you want to just see our different committees, it's just one page, so just scroll down. It's a lot of information on there. Our housing committee has fully booked their housing program for the month of June. So as soon as we get information about the next class, we'll let you know. Our housing, yes, the branch is currently closed. Our housing committee has helped hundreds of families become homeowners in just a little under 2 years. So that is a dynamic program that we have. It's not free. And the reason why I say it's not free is because it requires your time. You have to commit to the program.
But there's no price.
But there's no dollar price for you to get that get enrolled. So we want to encourage you to do that. Also, if you are a member and you are on the Young Adults Committee, when do y'all meet?
We meet on the first Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. So that we're actually having a meeting tomorrow. So if you're interested in joining us, please reach out to me at youngadult@naacphouston.org. Bear with us. So it is a monitored mailbox. So we may not get back to you right away, but if you are emailing me today or tomorrow, I will get that information to you if you're interested in joining our committee meeting tomorrow. We're meeting virtually. So we just had an all unit call last night. So right now branches are shut down all across the country if they do have an actual office. So don't expect an in-person meeting. But all of our meetings are happening virtually right now, and we'll move once we're giving approval from our national organization to open back up. But right now, we heard last night that's not in the near future. So just bear with us. Once you become a member, if you are a member, we'll share that information for our general membership meetings, which occur the third Thursdays of every month at 6:30 p.m.
Yeah,
so
and those are done virtually as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So to answer this question, I know I answered it a little bit earlier, but just to make sure everyone caught it, the branch is currently closed and physically, but we are operating in a very busy virtual setting. So just bear with us. And if you email a committee and they don't respond, you can always inbox us, inbox our social media. And we can kind of direct that for you because those are monitored emails. So it's not like someone goes to work and opens up their work email. So
that's my monitor. Like we take it.
It's volunteerism, and just bear with us. But we're happy to have you. We will resume back to the scheduled show that we were supposed to have. We'll get back to domestic violence and trafficking. But we just made an executive decision. And when I say we, I mean our production team. It's a group of, I want to say 8 or 9 of us made a decision that we needed to have this conversation today, coming off the heels of watching Houstonian, our brother George Floyd, be tortured and murdered. So we needed this balm, so to speak, no different from what Kirk Franklin and Fred Hammond did on Sunday.
BALM.
BALM, balm. Yes. So like, what is it? The gosh, I can't even, I was gonna make a joke and then God just snatched the words out of my mouth. Okay, I'm supposed to do that. But yeah, so we're excited to have you. Portia, anything you want to share with us in terms of announcements?
Yes, so really quickly, guys, at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, I put it in the comments, but it's probably far up now. The national office is holding a town hall meeting. So they're calling an emergency town hall meeting. So this is going to happen virtually as well. A Nation in Peril. That's tonight at 7 p.m. You can RSVP at naacp.org. That's naacp.org for our national website. Or you can dial in at 866-757-0756. That is going to feature our national president, Derek Johnson, along with some other esteemed panelists. And they're just going to talk about, it's just really our national response to what's going on. So I know we've experienced or gotten a lot of inquiries about a statement from the Houston branch. So just so y'all know, as July said, we're under the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So we're a unit, a branch. So the National Association has issued multiple statements, official statements on behalf of the organization in response to George Floyd's death and the other numerous deaths and killings that have happened, the responses to the rebellions, July's terminology, not the riots, the rebellions that have gone on across the country. So this is if you want to hear the official kind of viewpoint of the National Association, I encourage you guys to attend that emergency teletown hall that's happening in literally 30 minutes.
Real quick, because I know we got to go. Do you know if that's going to be streamed live through their Facebook?
More than likely, it will be live on their Facebook and maybe on their Instagram. So
we'll stream it.
So we can stream it for you. We can share that video. I know July can share it from our branch page, and I will share it from the Young Adult Committee page as well for those of you who are members of that.
Yeah. So we'll get those up, and we thank you all. Remember, the last day to register to vote for the primary runoff is June 15th, and the primaries, yes,
our July 14th. But we will have a special episode next week to talk more about that as well.
Yes, we will. So we are so happy to have had you. We're done in under 2 hours. We thank you. Have a beautiful week. Be blessed, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.